didn't realize how hot he sounds.
So are you Team Justin then?
Yeah.
You've probably heard a lot of drama surrounding It Ends With Us, the movie involving Blake Lively and the producer, or who was supposed to be the main producer, who owns the rights to the book to make the movie, Justin Baldoni. This video is meant to clear up confusion, so we'll go ahead and get started. I watched the film and it was pretty clear that Blake Lively had taken over the whole thing. She had her friend's music playing, they did close-up shots on her Louboutins, her shoes, and her outfits. It seemed to be all about Blake as Blake and not her actually playing the character of Lily Bloom. It became more of an ego trip piece rather than actively doing what was supposed to be done for the movie to create a connection to the audience. She basically took over his whole movie, and at the premiere, she was the one walking the red carpet, and she had him placed in the basement with his friends and family. No, seriously, they were with all of the waters and supplies in the basement of this place. I had to watch the movie premiere in a separate movie theater. She slapped him with a court case for SA and harassment, and it seemed like a lot of people started to be on Blake's side, but I kind of was like, there's something fishy going on here, especially knowing that she advocated for Harvey Weinstein in the middle of all the drama going on, and he was tried and convicted for SA on multiple women. And she also was an advocate for Woody Allen after knowing that he had a child with his stepdaughter and had groomed her. Okay? So, not really the advocate for women that I'm thinking she's trying to pass herself off as. So I was side-eyeing this lawsuit already. But let's look into the actual documents of this lawsuit, because it's very telling, and she has sealed her coffin shut. Be Better, who's known for his downfall videos on TikTok, did a comprehensive analysis of the entire lawsuit, and he gave it to us, and now I'm going to give it to you.
Okay, so it literally took me 9 hours to get through and understand the entire Justin Baldoni lawsuit. I would be lying to you guys if I didn't say reading this and going through it with a fine-tooth comb and really making a meaningful effort to just look at the facts alone didn't completely change my entire perspective on the situation. So I'm going to do my best to go through the most important points that I found, because I think I discovered some things that I have not seen anybody else talk about. Before I do, I would just like to say that I don't get paid through TikTok, and doing these types of videos, the video essays, the deep dives, it doesn't really benefit me or my business in any way. So it would really just mean a lot if you're not following me to just press the little follow button. It's free, it's really easy, and it would mean a lot. So thank you. Now, before people come at me in the comments, I just want to say, yes, initially I did fully believe Blake Lively, and even after Justin Baldoni filed his first lawsuit against the New York Times, I read that, I still was not fully convinced of his case, to be honest with you. And I'm not going to apologize for that, because at the end of the day, we should all be aware it is statistically unlikely for a woman to lie about sexual harassment claims. So I'm not going to apologize for having a knee-jerk reaction of trying to kind of course correct. However, there is also a special place in hell for people who lie about these types of things. Absolutely. Because it creates an atmosphere where people who are real victims are scared to come forward. I was not in the room. I do not know these people. You guys know how I feel about celebrities. But just keep in mind the track record here. I was one of the few people that I didn't immediately change my mind when Justin Baldoni first came out with his side of the story. I was not prepared for the mountain and the line-by-line evidence that disputed every single solitary thing that Blake Lively said. Everything. So, unless Blake Lively has some massive smoking gun, like a video of Justin Baldoni harassing her or doing something terrible, I am terrified for her and Ryan Reynolds' reputation, because if this goes to court, it could be the end of them. The end of them forever, because they seem like terrible, terrible people. So after reading the first two lawsuits and going through them line by line, there was still one question for me that wasn't adding up, which is, how did this seemingly normal friendship and working relationship between Justin and Blake turn sour so dramatically and escalate to the point of such intense hatred between the two? And after reading this lawsuit, I think we found that answer. I truly, wholeheartedly believe that the only explanation to this is that there was some type of underlying flirtation happening between the two. I believe that someone developed feelings for the other. Ryan Reynolds sensed this, discovered this in some way, because this is the only explanation for me as to why he would be so bent on absolutely destroying this individual's life. I'd like to remind you guys that both Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds met each other being co-stars and fell in love being co-stars. This is something that happens very often because you're in close quarters with someone. All the actors are good looking. You're simulating sex and kissing with somebody. Feelings can occur. This is also how Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds met when they were both with other partners. I believe that both Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds cheated on their respective partners when they got together on Green Lantern, allegedly. So when we look at their messages, I think it makes a lot of sense because I don't know about you guys, but I don't think this is appropriate the way that these co-stars were speaking to each other. So let's look at this. On both their parts. At one point, Justin Baldoni messages Blake Lively in the evening and says, "I like sentimental Blake." She says, "Never met her." He says, "I also like asshole Blake, don't worry. Good night." She says, "I've met her. So have my suppositories." Okay, so a little bit of an inappropriate joke on behalf of Blake Lively, referencing inserting something up her rectum. Another time, Lively was so close and comfortable with Baldoni that she freely breastfed in front of him during meetings. She took photos of him holding and soothing her crying baby in her penthouse. They laughed deliriously during late-night writing sessions. All of these took place after the alleged sexual harassment. Another time, this is referenced again. He says, the lawsuit says Baldoni filmed her uncontrollably laughing with him as they rehearsed late night into the evening, often delirious with exhaustion. So this is the infamous text message that Blake Lively sent to Justin Baldoni, again at 10 p.m. in the evening. Wrote this man an essay. I'm not sure if Ryan Reynolds was sitting right next to her when she did, but I do not think it is remotely out of the realm of possibility that someone as ego-driven as Ryan Reynolds could have become insecure in the fact that his wife was collaborating so closely and filming something so intimate as this film was with someone, and as they say, you lose them the way that you catch them. So that could have been a thought that was percolating in the back of his mind. That was the underlying emotional factors that drove this disagreement that really should have been settled privately into a full-blown war. As you guys know, this is the infamous text message that was sent the evening that Justin Baldoni was allegedly ambushed by Ryan Reynolds and Taylor Swift, who were talking about how Blake Lively's script was so amazing, basically suggesting that you better pick Blake Lively's script. And this is the infamous message where she compared herself to Khaleesi. She said, "I am Khaleesi. I happen to have a few dragons, for better or worse, but usually for better, because my dragons also protect those I fight for. So really, we all benefit from those gorgeous monsters of mine. You will too, I can promise you." This message really disgusts me because I know we know really powerful people do this, but to just hear somebody so brazenly talk about the influence she has because she's friends with one of the most powerful celebrities in the entire world. Ryan Reynolds is obviously extremely powerful in Hollywood. To sort of use that as a veiled threat is pretty disgusting and honestly just really embarrassing. I don't think Taylor Swift is probably happy about being used as a bargaining tool. So the first thing that Blake Lively seemingly did lie about is when she was saying that Justin Baldoni was fat shaming her and that there was no scene in the film where she had to be lifted. There was in fact a scene where she had to be lifted, which was cut from the movie because of her. Justin Baldoni did in fact and does have proof that he has a back injury, and he also did show proof that the reason he inquired about her weight was so he could practice physically, so he could lift her up. So he wasn't really fat shaming her. Not only was he not fat shaming her, he was actually doing the opposite, and we have messages to prove that he was actually supporting her and the insecurities that she was feeling. He said, "I want you to look amazing. Anything you're insecure about, we'll walk through and get creative together and make you comfortable. I don't want you to stress about your body. It's the last thing you need." So there you go.
Before we keep going with this, I want you to see a video that I made that was a straight reference to one of the allegations in Blake Lively's court case against Justin Baldoni. Watch this. This is one of the scenes that was heavily referenced in the Blake Lively lawsuit against Justin Baldoni, and coming from someone who runs a national talent and acting school, I want to explain to you what's actually happening here. At this moment, Blake says that this was unscripted and he went in to kiss her, right? So we're watching that happen. And then also unscripted, he goes in and is about to go in for her neck. And she said this made her feel uncomfortable. It was like a little bit too much for her. First, let's hear what was actually happening on set with audio. Watch what she said. It's more romantic if we're like dancing and talking. So they're discussing what's going on in the scene as they're doing it. Because it's like the moment you kiss, you give them the thing that they want to see. That's what Blake said. Do you know what I mean? He says yes. So they should feel like that's why almost kissing is good. Almost kissing is good. They're discussing what's about to happen in this scene. School that I run, this is basic acting 101, and it is called pantomime. When you're acting according to music, which we heard music going on in the background, they're hearing the music as well, and they're just acting out how the music feels and how they know the vibe of the scene is supposed to be. Pantomime is pretty much what you do in most commercials when you are auditioning for them, because you're not sitting there talking to the screen in a lot of commercials. There's some sort of music playing, and you're really just like acting it out. What he's doing here is very basic, fundamental pantomime. And also, they discussed it before they did it. Not only that, but when he needed to say something to one of the directors, he jumped right out of character and began to speak to them. He was not into her. He was acting. This is basic pantomime acting, and Blake doesn't know that because she's not a real actress. Not looking too good for Blake, still. But let's keep going.
Okay, welcome to part 2 of going through Justin Baldoni's lawsuit to Blake Lively. This is not my job. I don't get paid for this, so please follow me. It's 2 a.m. and we are only halfway done. So, another part about Blake Lively's lawsuit, when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, Justin Baldoni is such a creep, is he allegedly called her hot during the scene where she was wearing a onesie. According to this lawsuit, what Baldoni actually said was he said, it will be hot, as it was 90 degrees in the small bar with no air conditioning. Lively mischaracterizes this in her complaint as Baldoni referring to her personally as hot, using the slang term. And in the footnotes of this section, it says this entire interaction was documented on camera and they have the receipts. This is yet another example that if this is true, presumably it is, and it goes to court, and they have footage of him saying it will be hot and not calling her hot. And she tried to basically completely ruin this person's life over something that was a very malicious fabrication of the context of what was really said. That's not going to look good for her. And this is kind of why my predominant theory is that Ryan Reynolds is behind this, because it really feels like at a certain point, Blake Lively just stopped wanting to be in contact with Justin Baldoni, and someone behind the scenes took over and was contacting everybody, Sony, Wayfair, Baldoni. It was all going through Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' people. I think that this was Ryan Reynolds, because this is the only explanation for me, because if Blake Lively knew the truth, I can't imagine she would be willing to risk her entire reputation trying to take someone else down when it doesn't seem like the facts are on her side. Okay, so this next part is a little bit uncomfortable for me to read because it's not appropriate, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's important. Blake Lively alleged in her complaint that Justin Baldoni was basically this creep who kept bringing up all of these sexual things, and specifically referenced a conversation where they were talking about orgasming for a sexual scene in the film. So the lawsuit states that the character Ryle was not to orgasm after he satisfied Lily, the character. Lively remarked as herself and said, I'd be mortified if that happened to me, personalizing the character's sexual act. Baldoni, following Lively's lead in what he understood to be an attempt to connect with the characters, remarked that those have been some of the most beautiful moments between him and his wife. They then moved on. So Justin Baldoni was basically saying, I satisfy my wife. It seems like Ryan Reynolds doesn't satisfy his. That's just what it says. I'm sorry. She also accused Justin Baldoni about constantly bringing up porn, but apparently another instance that was caught on camera was Lively started that conversation, and she said, I don't want it to look like porn, and opened up that she had never seen porn in her life. Baldoni complimented her and said that's wonderful, because unfortunately he was exposed to it as a young age and developed an addiction, which is something he's discussed in his book and his podcasts. So it was actually Blake Lively, allegedly, that brought up that conversation to begin with. So Justin Baldoni's lawyer also disputes the claim that Blake Lively made in her complaint, where she said she felt uncomfortable that Justin Baldoni hired his friend to play the OBGYN. They state that Baldoni casting an experienced actor who happens to be a friend is no different than casting Lively's sister, who was cast because she is Lively's sister. So I didn't realize this, but they actually did hire Blake Lively's sister for this film, so she did have a role. And then they explain that the actor portraying the OBGYN is actually an award-winning Shakespearean-trained actor with a master's degree in acting from UCLA. Now, this next part, I want you guys to pay attention because it is probably the most damning piece of information for Blake Lively, and it is ultimately the reason why I was so on her side to begin with, because it's really starting to seem like she grossly misled the public with this one little thing, but it's very, very important, possibly the most important thing. It is crucial to note that the list of grievances read at the ambush meeting where Ryan Reynolds verbally assaulted Justin Baldoni, allegedly, was separate and apart from the 17-point return to production demands and were never presented to any of the parties present. Though Lively's complaint misleadingly suggests the parties agreed to a list of 30 items, many of the items listed on her complaint were new, entirely based in lies, and neither read nor provided to any of the parties, let alone agreed to. The only document presented to the parties was the 17-point return to production demands presented on November 9th and signed over 2 weeks after this meeting on January 9th. So the reason why that's so huge is the way that Blake Lively's lawyers wrote her complaint is she put down this list of 30 grievances at the beginning. And she made it seem like Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath signed on to those grievances of all of those little specific things of walking in the trailer and sexual harassment and watching her when she was breastfeeding and smelling her hair and bringing up porn and all of those really, really messy stuff. That actually isn't what was agreed to in the meeting. So there was a 17-point list that was some of the more generic things that they agreed to because it was already in the contracts. And then there was a 30-point list that she wrote after the fact that nobody ever saw, but then she included in the lawsuit to make it seem like they agreed to that, which is actually definitely grounds for defamation because it really is that misleading. I hope that I did a good enough job explaining why that's so significant. Then the next 30 pages, you guys know, just sort of details all the screenshots of the editors, the producers, the castmates. What it really does is it paints a picture of Blake Lively, sort of everybody treating her the way that they treated Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada. As soon as she walks in, everybody's bending over backwards for her. They're giving her the dailies. They're letting her have the producer credits. They're letting her edit the movie. They're just completely bending over backwards for her because she was constantly threatening to destroy everybody's reputation and not market the film. So it definitely does a good job of lending credence to the claim that she tried to take over the film. Another piece of evidence that is very damning to Blake Lively and wasn't in the original lawsuit that Justin Baldoni filed, which is why I said I wanted to see proof of this, is they do in fact have proof that they screen tested both Justin Baldoni's version of the film as well as Blake Lively's version of the film with an audience, and they scored his significantly higher, 20% higher, rated his film as excellent versus Blake Lively's version. And significantly, the only group that it polled well with was actually men, which is not the target audience for this film. Need I remind you, since it's become completely lost, that this film was about domestic violence and was a film for women. So Justin Baldoni kind of rightfully used this as evidence that they should have used his version of the film, but Blake Lively reneged on her promise and insisted that her version be released to the public instead of Baldoni's cut, even claiming that the book's author, Colleen Hoover, would refuse to promote the film as well if Blake Lively's version was not chosen. Okay, you guys know these pages. Basically, he was shunned from the film. He had a spinal cord injury. He was in the hospital. He was sent to the basement for his own premiere, which is pretty terrible. And then another significant aspect is Blake Lively was adamant about getting the PGA designation mark. So this is a coveted producer credit that is taken very seriously in Hollywood. So the only reason that I think that Blake Lively wanted this so bad is I believe that she possibly thought that she was going to receive an Oscar for this film, if not for Best Actress, which is hilarious. She would never obviously get that. But if the film was nominated for Best Picture, the producers are the ones that receive the Oscar. So if she has the PGA credit, that's a huge thing for her resume to have an Oscar. So I think that's the reason why she had that. And then ultimately when they said no, that's when she messaged them and said, any goodwill between us is done. So that was her red line. After, they still capitulated to her and eventually gave her the PGA credit, but apparently it wasn't enough for Blake. After seemingly getting literally everything that she wanted, according to these receipts, and she still decided to make this public. Another piece of this lawsuit that I think most people missed is a very subtle Taylor Swift call out here. So listen to this. The other cast members also unfollowed Baldoni, creating the false impression that Baldoni had done something wrong. Lively was leaving what she had earlier referred to as crumbs, a social media strategy she had learned from a close celebrity friend to give fans just enough to allow them to come to their own conclusions, thereby launching an army of detectives that, on information and belief, Lively hoped would turn against Baldoni. So they're alleging that Lively orchestrated this and sort of left the breadcrumbs. I think that's an obvious reference to Taylor Swift, who is known to sort of leave little hints and unfollow people and do this and that because she knows she's under such a microscope. She can do the tiniest little thing to completely shift the narrative in such a dramatic way. Now, you might be wondering, but why did Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds care so much about taking over this film? And I think the obvious explanation is that they wanted the rights to the sequel.
Oh, it does go on to say that Blake Lively and her husband Ryan Reynolds wanted to take the sequel rights away from Justin Baldoni, even though he had bought them several years ago, and this was his passion project, and he was finally getting it off the ground. She was basically trying to take it away from him. I was recently interviewed on TMZ regarding the 7-minute voice note Justin Baldoni sent Blake Lively at 2 a.m. Blake Lively seems to have released this to try to make him look like a creep, sending her this long-winded, emotional message at 2 a.m. to support her claims in her lawsuit. But context is really important here, and we should watch this clip. By the way, if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and do that if you want.
This is Sarah from Chicago, and I want to talk about the Justin Baldoni voice note. I think context is really important here. This 2 a.m. voice note was sent in direct response to Blake Lively's 1:50 a.m. text about her being Khaleesi and having dragons. This was his worried response, I think. We have to remember production considered Blake the most important person on set, and so any grievance she had needed to be immediately rectified, and I think that's what he was doing, even though it was long-winded and kind of emotional. He also mentioned her husband being so talented and said, give my love to Ryan, and also mentioned his own wife. So I think that he just had no ulterior motive. He just didn't realize how hot he sounds.
So are you Team Justin then?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that practices, mindfulness all the time. He's just a little misunderstood, I think.
I mean, look, what you just said is exactly his case, is that he says, I felt like I needed to make sure I got on board with whatever Blake wanted or I was going to get run off this film. And that's what he would say, that's what he was trying to do with this long-winded message.
This is not looking good for her at all.
So in Blake Lively's lawsuit, this is how she described the situation. And then I'm going to show you the footage of what actually happened and allow you guys to discern whether or not her portrayal of that was accurate or not. On another occasion, Mr. Baldoni and Miss Lively were filming a slow dance scene for a montage in which no sound was recorded. Narrator chimes in, sound was recorded. Mr. Baldoni chose to let the camera roll and have them perform the scene, but did not act in character as Ryle. Instead, he spoke to Miss Lively out of character as himself. At one point, he leaned forward and slowly dragged his lips from her ear down her neck as he said, "It smells so good." None of this was remotely in character or based on any dialogue in the script. and nothing needed to be said because, again, there was no sound. Mr. Baldoni was caressing Miss Lively with his mouth in a way that had nothing to do with their roles, and when Miss Lively later objected to this behavior, Miss Baldoni's response was, "I'm not even attracted to you." Wait a second. Blake Lively made a mistake in her lawsuit. It says Miss Baldoni's response. So unless she's referring to Justin Baldoni's wife, I think they meant to write Mr. Baldoni.
She named someone that wasn't there.
Are you guys not even gonna spell check your lawsuit? Wow, that's really embarrassing. Wow, that's actually crazy that I just noticed that. So anyway, let's watch what really happened. I'm old-fashioned, I don't do editing, so here's my laptop.
Let's score another.
I'm probably getting really pissed. Well, it's not that. It's my body makeup.
That's it. So I think that we can all agree that Blake Lively's characterization of this interaction was not accurate. And I'm still not over the fact that her team made a typo in such an important and consequential lawsuit. Seriously, what little respect I had for you guys is completely gone. However, since I'm me and I'm an asshole and I have no loyalty to these people whatsoever, my only loyalty is to the truth, I would also like to point out there is something that is not fully accurate in Justin's recount of this interaction as well. In Justin's lawsuit, and this is minor, but I noticed it because nothing gets past me, they say, Lively apologized for the smell of her spray tan and body makeup. Baldoni responded, "It smells good." Blake Lively never apologized for the smell of her spray tan. She just said,
It's not.
"I'm getting my spray tan on you." She didn't say anything about the smell. So regardless, this interaction is uncomfortable and awkward to watch because acting is a very uncomfortable job to have. But I definitely don't think any of this constitutes harassment. Now, Blake Lively's legal team has actually already responded to the public disclosure of this footage being released. And they stated, Justin Baldoni and his lawyer may hope that this latest stunt will get ahead of the very damning evidence against him. But the video itself is damning. Every frame of the released footage corroborates to the letter what Miss Lively described in her complaint. Every moment of this was improvised by Mr. Baldoni with no discussion or consent. They then go on to say that while they are focused on misleading media narratives, we are focused on the legal process. We are continuing our efforts to require Mr. Baldoni and his associates to answer in court under oath rather than through manufactured media stunts. Blake, if by some miracle you're watching this, just understand, the lawyers don't care about you. Lawyers don't care. They just want to get paid. They're getting paid a shit ton of money whether or not you win or you lose. You need to talk to somebody that actually cares about you. And if someone in your life actually cared about you, they probably would have told you to just drop this because your attempt to rehabilitate your reputation is massively backfiring. People had already moved on, honestly. Like, no one was talking about you anymore. And this is just not looking good. If this does go to court and it becomes another Amber Heard situation, another Gwyneth Paltrow situation, okay, the Gwyneth Paltrow one was funny, but I just don't think it's going to go your way. And the reason that I think this is Justin Baldoni's lawyer has actually just responded to that response already. This is all in the same day. And Justin Baldoni's lawyer has stated that he is putting together a website as we speak where they're planning to upload every single text message that they have between these two, every single piece of evidence, and every single piece of video footage from that set. So if the facts are not 100% on your side, Blake, which they seem to not be, the last thing you want is to go through an entire discovery process and have every single email, every single text, every single piece of video footage microanalyzed by TikTokers. Don't do it. Run. Settle, drop it, and move on with your family and your life. Hello? Control room? Got it. So we are just getting word that Colleen Hoover has officially jumped ship. If you guys remember, Colleen Hoover, the original author of this book, actually came to Blake Lively's defense publicly, and after the backlash, she has completely deleted her Instagram account. So I would not count on Colleen Hoover supporting you anymore. And as public perception steadily shifts against Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, I am starting to expect all the people who were defending them publicly to start dropping like flies. So again, I just don't think it's in Blake Lively's best interest to go to court and have this entire thing be televised. But if my understanding of human psychology is correct, I think that they've dug themselves too deep, that I don't see them settling. I think that they'll probably end up going to court and just ruining what little goodwill they have left.
Have it, Blake. I think you're cooked. I hope he's vindicated. That's all I can say. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tea if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.